Hey bees, I'm Marie from Humblebee and Me, and welcome to February 2019's Q&A video. Just a reminder, if you have a question that you would like to see answered in one of these videos, throw it in the comments below and I'll add it to the rolling document of questions that I keep and kind of pull from whenever I go to make one of these videos. I thought I'd give a bit of a personal update first. So I'm just back from Texas, where I was speaking at the Belton Mother Earth News Fair about DIY cosmetics formulation. My next trip is going to be to Asheville, North Carolina for the Asheville Mother Earth News Fair. So if you're in the area and interested in attending a meetup, make sure you follow Humblebee and Me on Facebook. That's typically where I organize events like that. We did have a meetup in Austin, Texas, which was an absolutely lovely evening with some great ladies. And yeah, these meetups are really, really fun, and I'd love to see you at one of them if you're ever in an area that I'm in. Our first question today is one that I received somewhere, and I didn't note where I got it or who asked it, but it's a great question. And it's basically, how do you know how much of an ingredient to buy? Which is, yeah, a fantastic question. So the first thing you should be looking at is how much of this ingredient is typically used in a recipe. Like, what does it do? Is it a butter and you can use it neat on your skin, or is it an essential oil that needs to be used at very low dilutions? If it's something that can be used undiluted, you typically would be looking at a larger amount of it, and if it's something that needs to be diluted, you'd be looking at a smaller amount of it. And the more the ingredient needs to be diluted, the less of it you can buy. Generally speaking, with oils and butters, especially ones that I haven't used before, I'm usually looking at buying somewhere in the 100 gram or milliliter to maybe 500 gram or milliliter category. I would start with the smaller amount, and then if you really, really like it and you find that you're using it a lot, go back and buy it in a larger amount. With fragrances and essential oils, I would recommend starting in the 5 to 15 milliliter range if the ingredient is sold in sizes that small. I know sometimes fragrances start at 1 ounce and there's kind of no going down from there. And let the price point be your guide, and also your familiarity with this scent. If you're just trying something out, definitely get the smallest size possible. For essential oils, you should also be looking at the maximum usage level. Some essential oils like rose and oak moss absolute have very, very low maximum usage levels, so there's no need to buy a huge amount of them because you really cannot use that much of them in any one project. Something else to consider is kind of, what are you making? If you're making soap, you can generally buy things in much larger quantities. For soap making, for my essential oils, I'm usually buying those at least 100 milliliters at a time, which is roughly 3.3 fluid ounces. And for most fats and whatnots, I would probably be buying those at least 500 grams to a kilo, simply because soap really goes through a lot of ingredients and you use a lot of everything when you're making soap. For most skincare products, you can typically buy a lot less. A larger batch of lotion might be 200 grams. I usually make most lotions at about 100 grams. And for cosmetics, I'm usually looking at significantly smaller batches, like 5 grams. So when you're looking at an ingredient like a preservative, Liquid Dermal Plus, that has a usage rate of about 0.5%, 0.1 to 0.5%, we're usually using it on the higher end of that range, so 0.5%. And you know that you're generally only making about 100 grams of lotion at a time, you'll know that you're using 0.5 gram of Liquid Dermal Plus in every single one of those batches. So if you bought 100 grams of Liquid Dermal Plus, that could make you 200 batches of lotion, which is a lot of lotion. So 100 grams is probably the most you should buy at any given time. You could probably get away with getting a lot less. Price should absolutely factor into your decisions of how much to buy. I think that's probably going to be one of the first things most people look at. You see the price and kind of go, or, ooh, that's cheap. I would definitely recommend not buying significantly more of something just because it's kind of cheaper by the milliliter, unless it's an ingredient you're already familiar with and you already know you use a lot of, because you aren't saving money by the milliliter if you are throwing out 75% of whatever it is 8 years after you bought it. Also consider how versatile the ingredient is and its shelf life. So if you're looking at something like an emulsifying wax, which is very versatile and has quite a long shelf life, you can probably buy more of it than you might buy a sort of less versatile, maybe very expensive carrier oil. I'm also thinking that this would be a good blog post or FAQ article. It's just kind of a table with rough amounts of sort of recommended purchasing quantities. So if you're interested in that, let me know and I'll whip it up. Our next question is from Angela, and Angela asks, "Hi Marie, I'm wondering about specialized products for specific areas of the body. Namely, how would an eye cream be different from a face cream versus a hand cream or a body lotion? Thank you." So this is a great question. As a formulator, the two biggest things I'm going to be looking at are the needs of a specific product and the cost of the formula, cost of adding up all the ingredients, and how much does it cost to make this thing. So I'm going to be looking at, I think we'll start with like the eye cream and then go face, hand, and body, and kind of look at how things would broaden out, because we're looking at basically going from one of the most sensitive parts of the body to sort of a more general application of just kind of general like body. And we're looking also at a greatly expanding usage area, right? Sort of just the eye area versus like your whole body. So for an eye cream, think the eye area is very delicate. So we're going to be wanting to make sure that we're putting in very gentle ingredients, nothing too strongly fragrant, nothing that's going to make the eyes water. You might put a whack load of like peppermint in something for your feet because you enjoy the cool tingly sensation on your feet. You're not going to enjoy that so much in the eye area. So that's a definite formulation consideration. The eye area also has some sort of unique problems or challenges that we would be looking to address. So typically things like depuffing or brightening the area, which again, you wouldn't be as concerned with in a foot product. Because an eye product doesn't need to cover a huge amount of the body, a huge amount of surface area, we can also look at including more expensive ingredients in it, because they'll really kind of just be delivered to a targeted area and we can get that bang for our buck. As we move out to something like a face cream, this is covering a larger area than an eye cream, not a huge area, but a larger area. Our sensitivity concerns are going to be slightly lower. Again, I would still err on the side of sensitive for the face, but I will put essential oils in a face cream, whereas I would avoid putting them in an eye cream. Generally speaking, I will still happily use all kinds of fancy ingredients in a face cream. I can't think of any active that I personally own that is so expensive that I would only put it in an eye product and wouldn't put it in a face product. Now if we're stepping out to something like a hand cream, for me, I'm thinking about a hand cream. I'm going to use a hand cream a lot. I could easily apply hand cream upwards of 5 to 10 times throughout a day, kind of depending on ambient humidity and how often I'm washing my hands in any given day. So that'll start to if we kind of look at maybe like cost of use of product per day, that is a definite factor, right? If you're using something 5 to 10 times a day on your hands versus sort of like once a day on your eyes, obviously that hand cream has a lot more opportunity to be a lot more expensive. And for a hand cream, I am typically going to be a lot more concerned with the dry down and how quickly it absorbs, because I don't want to have greasy hands throughout the day. So that would be, for me, a specific consideration for a hand cream, especially a day hand cream. If it was going to be a heavier night hand cream, the type of thing that you would put on and then maybe put a pair of gloves on and then go to sleep, it could be a heavier, sort of greasier, more occlusive product. But yeah, those kinds of considerations are things that you should be thinking about when you're thinking about creating products for different parts of the body. And then for body products, this of course is going to be the largest surface area, so you're typically not going to be including any really expensive ingredients in a body product. You totally can if you want to, but if you have anything that's like very spendy, I personally would save that for the face area rather than like, my thighs. I'm typically much happier to have a more heavily scented product as a body product than I would be as a face product, because it's quite a lot further away from my nose. We can also look at more sort of sensation type essential oils, so things like peppermint, which will give, and menthol, which give kind of like a cooling tingle. That can be really, really nice on the body, and I would generally avoid those sorts of things on the face. So those are just some considerations regarding different types of creams and lotions. There are more, of course. There's always more to think about, especially when you're thinking about you personally, your personal preferences, what you like for your hands versus what you like for your eyes versus what works for your face. But that's kind of a couple of things to start thinking about when you're thinking about how you might make different choices for different products. Our next question is from Hanna, who is a patron, so thank you so much for your support, Hanna. And Hanna asks, "This is something I personally would find very difficult, but when you edit, is it weird to see your own face all the time, or is it something that you get used to?" So it was definitely weird at first. It was definitely kind of cringeworthy at first, especially because if we look at some of those earlier videos I filmed, I was significantly more awkward and more nervous on camera, and as I'm watching, you know, all of the video clips that I filmed in a day, just like utterly cringeworthy for a vast majority of the footage I had captured. So that was definitely a little painful and a little bit weird. I have now been making videos for over 2.5 years now, so I'm a lot better on camera. I'm a lot less likely to have a completely derpy meltdown, so it's not as bad. But yeah, I guess I'm used to it, but I'm also better than I used to be, so that helps as well. And our last question today is one that I have heard from a couple different people over the last little while, so I thought I'd just put it in a video, which is, why don't you use a thermometer, or why haven't I seen you use thermometers when you make things? So I thought the first thing we'd look at is, well, why does anybody use a thermometer? And generally speaking, the biggest reason you're going to use a thermometer is because you're working with ingredients that can't be heated past a certain point, and you want to make sure that you aren't doing that. So a place you will absolutely see me use a thermometer is if I am making something that is going to be solid and I need to incorporate a heat-sensitive preservative into the product before it becomes completely solid, but I need to do that, you know, below the temperature that like the maximum temperature for the preservative. So one place you will definitely see this is Syndet products. So I know my concentrated lemon dishwashing detergent is a place where you can watch me use a thermometer in the video to make sure that the product is just below that maximum temperature for the preservative before I quickly mash that in before the product becomes so stiff that, you know, you couldn't add a preservative, because it's very hard to stir things that are solid. One of the reasons I use water baths almost all of the time to heat things is because it's very hard to overheat ingredients that can be heated in a water bath. I find it's typically pretty hard to even get things with a melting point of around 85 degrees Celsius to melt in a water bath here at my altitude. So yeah, generally speaking, it's pretty hard to burn stuff in a water bath, which is why I like water baths. They're very dummy friendly. In my videos and blog posts, I typically stipulate that cool down ingredients should be added when the product feels cool to the touch. And so you generally want to be adding cool down ingredients at 40 degrees Celsius or cooler. Body temperature is about 37 degrees Celsius, so if something feels cool to the touch, we can be quite confident that it is below 40 degrees Celsius. So for reference, 40 degrees Celsius is about the temperature of a hot tub. So if you are feeling something and it feels cool, it's definitely going to be below 40 degrees Celsius. You don't really need a thermometer to guarantee that something is going to be below 40 degrees Celsius if it feels cool to the touch. For emulsions, I have found that as long as everything is melted through and is close enough in temperature that when you combine them, nothing's going to solidify before it can be blended in. So for instance, you know, obviously if you melt something that has some emulsifying wax or stearic acid in it, and then you pour in cold water, it's obviously just gonna seize. So you need those things to be close enough in temperature that you can blend them together thoroughly and then allow everything to cool together and become a cohesive end product, rather than just ending up with like chunks of solid stearic acid or emulsifying wax that have kind of gone, dear Lord, that's cold, and just kind of on you. I've made hundreds, if not thousands, of lotions this way over many, many years, and they've all been fine. I have a piece of sort of additional recommended reading linked in the description box below, and this is a blog post from Formula Botanica on why the heat and hold method is a myth. So generally speaking, why you probably don't need to be doing heating and holding with your formulation. So I'll throw a link to that in the description box below. It's definitely a worthwhile read. For soap making, honestly, it is just so much easier to combine everything at room temperature or maybe slightly warmer than room temperature, rather than trying to juggle the temperatures of your lye solution and your melted fat so that they're both at 120 degrees Fahrenheit is often recommended. That is so stressful for me. Like trying to get those things to match was just always a huge pain point for me when I was making soap. And so when I started doing things at room temperature, soap making became infinitely more pleasurable for me, and I've never had that method fail on me, and I've heard from so many readers that they also really enjoy soaping that way as well. Now, I am absolutely not saying that there's no need for thermometers when you are crafting your own skincare and formulating things. That's absolutely not the case, but I know that with the processes I use, so things like using water baths to insulate against overheating, and with the types of ingredients that I work with, it's typically not a thing that I need to do, which is why you don't see me use one very often. Okay, and that is that for this month's Q&A video. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, and do remember to check the description box below for relevant links to things I talked about in this video. So please subscribe, give me a thumbs up if you liked it, if you learned something, and I will see you next time.